Peters was a young 10-year-old girl living in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. She lived with her father and enjoyed things such as rollerblading and riding her bicycle, as well as gymnastics. People around her said that the most noticeable thing about Lily was her smile. I mean, I know it's a cliche for people to say, oh, her smile lit up the room. But truly, if you look at pictures of Lily, her smile truly was one of an innocent little girl. And that smile was taken away from her by someone she knew, someone she trusted, someone only a couple years older than her. Now, as always, full disclaimers, this case involves themes such as sexual assault, murder, CP, and just gross things. And if any of those things trigger you, I wholly implore you, take a step back, catch me in the next body cam watch, and I'll see you again. But without further ado, let's get into it. Around 9 p.m. on April 24th, 2022, Lily's father reported her missing. Now, before this, she went to her aunt's house, which was only 5 minutes away from her own house, to go and hang out with her cousin, Carson. Carson and Lily went off, Lily being on her bike, Carson being on his hoverboard, to a well-known trail right in their area. This trail was only 2 minutes in length, so riding your bike, it would only take about 2 minutes to get through this entire wooded trail. And directly next to this trail was residential streets and main roads. So this wasn't an isolated place in the middle of the woods. This was a pretty public area, and people will say that their kids often took this trail alone because it was safe. At least it was safe until what happened. As we later come to find out, Carson, who was in fact Lily's cousin, would become the main suspect in this case. And as details emerged, it paints a pretty horrifying picture. Before we get into that though, we're going to go back to Lily's father. Her father, after he reported her missing, went out to look for Lily, as any concerned parent would do. And he discovered her bicycle near this trail. And I just want to say, it must have been a truly horrifying discovery for her father to find his daughter's bicycle in the middle of the woods without his daughter on it, of course, just in a ditch somewhere. I can only imagine how he must have felt in that moment. I mean, my heart would drop if I found any article that belonged to my child in the middle of the woods at night, knowing that they're alone, probably scared. I mean, truly. But when he reported her missing, there was no immediate action from the police. I'm not saying that the police didn't take this case seriously, but there was no Amber Alert issued, which was a big sticking point in this case, because the qualifications for an Amber Alert to be issued are actually very strict. So you have to have a couple of things. So for an Amber Alert to be issued, a child has to be under the age of 17, have to have knowingly been abducted. There has to be a suspect or a suspect description or vehicle description for the Amber Alert, as well as serious threat to bodily harm of the child. Now, I guess since they didn't have a suspect, they couldn't issue this Amber Alert or whatever the case, but this Amber Alert wasn't issued, which ends up being a sticking point later on in the case. But I mean, at this point in time, when her father had already reported her missing, Lily was thought to have already been deceased. But the Amber Alert wouldn't have hurt in any way. And so people are actually petitioning for something called a Lily Alert to be imposed so that other kids that don't quite fit the criteria of an Amber Alert can still get help without having to meet all of these qualifications. Because I mean, you don't always know who's kidnapped your child. You don't always have a suspect description or a vehicle description. And in those cases, you know, at this point in time, nothing can be done in terms of the Amber Alert. Moving on though, her father and a couple of family members searched for her, but they could not find her. And the next morning, the police finally got involved, and started looking for Lily in these woods on this trail. And only a little bit away from her, where her bike was found, Lily's body was found, nude from the waist down. So it was clear that an SA had taken place, as well as somebody had clearly murdered Lily in a very brutal way. So let's talk about CPB. CPB, Carson Peters Berger, was a 14-year-old boy who is now, probably like 16 now? 17? But at the time, he was a 14-year-old boy who was Lily's cousin, and he was also the last person spotted with Lily, which is very curious, which we will get into in a minute, but he was the last person spotted with Lily. So before this, as I said previously, him and Lily went off on this trail, and Carson would later confess that even before they went on this trail, he had already planned the murder and rape of his cousin. He had already decided in his mind this was going to happen, and he followed through with it with no remorse and no regard. So on April 26th, only a couple days after the murder, Carson was questioned by police, where he confessed to the crime. He said that he lured Lily off the trail, saying, "Oh, let's go explore in the woods," or something along those lines. When he got her off the trail a little bit into the woods, he punched her in the stomach and then picked up a stick and beat her with it 3 times in the head. And when Lily was on the ground, probably begging for her life, if not just scared out of her mind, confused, because this is her cousin, this is family, this is blood. Family's supposed to protect one another, and here he is standing over her after beating her with a stick. He strangles her until he believes that she has died, and after that, he proceeds to unclothe her and SA her body. It is truly disturbing how much darkness was in this 14-year-old boy for him to be able to do something like this and feel nothing towards his own cousin, his own family member, someone he grew up with. I mean, someone that lived 5 minutes away from him, somebody who he knew, and he did this to her. Another really horrifying detail about this whole incident was the fact that he bit her. He bit her on one of her buttocks, and I think that's just truly just disturbing. Whenever I hear about a case that involves someone biting another individual, especially in murder cases and SA cases where someone bites another person, it is like the most animalistic, disturbing thing that someone can possibly do, in my opinion. I mean, how deeply disturbed do you have to be to bite your own cousin in a place like that after doing something so heinous? So the question becomes, why did he do it? He said that his whole motive was the SA. So his whole reason for doing any of this was because he wanted to SA Lily, which is very interesting when you start to look at the family history, because he's 14. I mean, what happened in his life? What went wrong in his life to where that's something that he could think of, something that he could do? Well, similar to the Taylor Schabusiness case, if you guys watched my video on that, his father actually was sentenced to 3 years in prison for possession of multiple crack pipes, as well as, I want to say, around 10 images of CP of little girls. So he was sentenced to 3 years for this, and while he was in jail, he wrote a pretty, I want to say, just weird letter to the judge asking for unsupervised visits with his son, because at the time he was only granted supervised visits with his son. In the letter, he states that Carson is the best parts of him, and that he would like to be able to get back to a normalcy with his son after everything that he was arrested for. His father was literally on the sex offenders registry. I mean, he was a certified pedophile. Like, he is, and still is, on the sex offenders registry and is a certified pedophile, yet he was petitioning the courts to allow him unsupervised visits with his son, which, I mean, thank God the courts denied this request, but it was very interesting to me that he was even allowed time with his son at all. Him and his son emailed daily while he was in prison and kept close contact. And I just want to know why he was allowed to keep close contact with his minor son when he was literally a sex offender, put on the registry, and charged with the things that he was charged with. I mean, that just seems kind of insane to me. Like, why are we letting this guy around kids at all? And even though his charges didn't include, like, essay of a child or, like, actually touching a child, CP is the exact same thing. There's still victims within CP. The CP and these things are not a victimless crime. So the fact that he was even allowed partial custody of his son and allowed to have supervised visitation with his son really was just insane to me. And it makes me wonder, what was Carson exposed to behind closed doors? And his mother wasn't any better. His mother was said to have exposed him to drugs and just negative things early on, I guess. I can't confirm any of this. Like, don't get me wrong, I can't confirm any of this, but people have said, like, his mother wasn't a good influence either. And so Carson was mostly raised by his grandma, who also wrote a letter into the judge later on in this case, which we're going to get to. But Carson's family life was truly not a good one. And that isn't to say that it excuses what he did, not in the slightest. I mean, people come from horrible places and horrible situations all the time and don't do things that he did, and certainly not to their own family. If Carson could do this to his own family member, to his own young cousin, 10-year-old cousin, it makes you wonder when he grows up what he would be capable of doing to a complete stranger. The necrophilia in this case also pegs me as just insane, because SA is one thing, but to do it to a dead body is just another level of just depraved. I mean, this kid was 14 years old, already having these kinds of thoughts and impulses that he acted on. And it's truly horrifying to think what he could be capable of when he grows up, if this is what he's capable of as a child. So after Carson killed his cousin and left her body in the woods, he went back home, took off his clothes, washed them, changed them, and after hearing about people worrying about where Lily was, he went back to where he left Lily and dragged her body a couple feet away and covered her with leaves before leaving once again, which just shows he had no remorse for his actions. I mean, and like I said before, Lily's body was found nude from the waist down. So when he came back to drag her body a couple feet away, he didn't even have the decency to put her pants back on. And it just shows how little he truly cared for Lily, his own cousin. I can't stress this enough, his own cousin. So the autopsy showed that Lily died of blunt force trauma and strangulation. The strangulation part, truly disturbing, as with the Taylor Schabusiness case, which I feel like there's just a lot of parallels with this case to that case, with the strangulation, the family history, things like that. But strangulation is really such a horrifying way to kill someone, because you are literally staring at them as you're putting this pressure on their neck and watching the life fade from their eyes. And for Carson to do that, watch his own cousin slowly die as he strangled her, is just truly disturbing. It's not like it was quick, because strangulation is never quick, and it's not like Lily was unconscious, or at least there's no reports that says she was unconscious. So from what we know, Lily was conscious while he was strangling her, staring up at her own cousin as he took her life. Now, after Carson was arrested, his lawyers actually wanted his case to be moved to juvenile court, because in juvenile court there are no sentences, so they don't spend time in prison. They spend time in detention centers or in a mental health facility or back at home with their parents. So for his lawyers to try and get his case moved to juvenile court was a very strategic decision, because in adult court he would be facing multiple life counts and spending the rest of his life in prison, in jail. Whereas if he was sentenced as a juvenile, he wouldn't be sentenced. He would end up spending time in a mental health hospital or a detention center, or even, I doubt it, but possibly back home with his parents. Now, luckily, this decision was overturned. They didn't decide to move the case to juvenile court, and it stayed in adult courts. And so Carson is facing up to life in prison at the age of 14 years old. He was charged with first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of first-degree sexual assault, and he pleaded not guilty, which is interesting because he confessed to it. So why now plead not guilty? During this time, his grandmother sent a letter to the courts begging the judge to send the case to juvenile court instead of allowing him to be charged as an adult. Because, as she said, Carson was a loving, giving, and caring individual, and he just got mixed up and he made a mistake. Carson's mistake was that he killed his own cousin, strangled his own cousin to death, and then sexually assaulted her body. Carson, at the age of 14, is not only a murderer, but a necrophiliac. I mean, truly, that is cause for some really serious punishments to be brought forth to him. I mean, if he's capable of this now, what would he be capable of later on? But she claims that he won't get the mental health help that he needs in prison, and that he should be sent to a mental hospital and not jail. While I agree that Carson needs mental health help, I also feel like justice here is way more important than the health of Carson Peters. I'm sorry, but am I the only one that doesn't really care about this kid's health? Like, when he showed such disregard for life only a couple years earlier, I mean, how much can people really change? That really is the question. Do we feel comfortable letting someone like this back out onto the streets, this time as a full-grown man, knowing how the justice system works, knowing how to get around the police, knowing what mistakes he made? I mean, truly. Michael Caldwell, a licensed psychologist, said that the 15-year-old had mild autism, which diminishes his ability to understand the harm in which he caused the victim, but stated that he can't confirm whether or not Carson would commit a similar crime in the future, meaning that he doesn't know if Carson would be capable of doing something similar in the future, which, hey man, I'm not a psychologist, but all I'm saying, if you're able to do something like this at 14 years old, I don't know. And I don't think that he should be let back with his family either, because, I mean, after Lily went missing, the entire area was on high alert. I mean, Lily was a child, and a child was just abducted. So the schools and the parents and everyone around was truly on high alert, and nobody was letting their kid out of their sight. Parents were advised by police to pick up and drop off their kids from school, and to, if at all possible, not let their kids go off alone outside at any point in time. Yet Carson's parents allowed him not only to leave the house and go back to the murder scene and like drag her body a couple feet away from where it was and cover it with leaves, not only during this time where everybody's on high alert and everybody's keeping their kids close to them, did they allow their kid to go off on his own, unsupervised, to do what? Okay, I guess whatever. They don't know. But, I mean, at the very least to them, there is a child abductor on the loose, And they're just letting their child go around unsupervised within this town where a kid, not only a kid, but a kid in their family was just abducted. Also, Carson was the last person seen with Lily. Did they not have any questions or any, I don't know, like, worries about the fact that he was the last person to see Lily and now he's going back out of the house while Lily is still missing, even though he was the last person that saw her? Like, what is the deal with that? I mean, did they just not care? Was it a neglect situation? Did they have an idea of what Carson was capable of and wanted to ignore the problem? I have no idea. But this family truly is troublesome. The last interesting bit of information that I want to share with you guys is that the day that Lily was found, there was a vigil held for her in her honor, and Carson attended this vigil. Witnesses say that they saw Carson hugging and comforting his family members at this vigil, all while knowing that he was the one that caused Lily's death. I mean, how much of a monster do you have to be to have the audacity to comfort your family members knowing that you're the one that caused them this pain? Something is truly, deeply, and profoundly wrong with Carson Petersberger. And I hope to God that he never gets out of prison. Because cases like this, people like this, all I'm saying is that when you have a track record going back this far, I'm talking about like how he's only 14, and if he grows up and they let him out of prison, I mean, truly, how many criminals have you seen that had issues like this, or not like this, but issues in their childhood, in their youth, that end up becoming way bigger issues in adulthood? I mean, like, what Carson did was truly horrific. And if he's let out of prison, there's no telling what he might do as an adult. There really is no telling. So, hey man, all I'm gonna say, I would not be unhappy if he ended up spending the rest of his life in prison. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know it was shorter, but there's not a whole lot of information on this case because it is ongoing, and the actual trial hasn't even started yet. Only in January was the case moved back to adult court instead of, being put in juvenile court. And the murder only happened in 2022, which was only 2 years ago. So we still have years and years of litigation awaiting us. And if there are any updates, I will definitely, if there's any significant updates, I'll definitely make another video discussing them, or at least make a post discussing them, because this case truly is horrifying. The fact that this monster could do something so terrible to his own family member, to his own cousin, that he lived 5 minutes away from. I mean, truly horrifying. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you guys have any cases you would like to see me cover, please leave them down in the comment section below. If there's any body cam footage videos you'd like to see me react to, leave them in the comment section below. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Ugh! This is nasty. SWAT Cup out.